I'd sat through their dinners for years, smiling when I was ignored, nodding when my name was used as a punchline. That night was no different. My sister's voice carried across the table, soft and sharp, the way a blade sounds when it's being cleaned. "She's just a clerk," she said, and laughter followed like it was rehearsed. Something in me didn't crack this time. It settled, cold, quiet, steady. I'd spent a lifetime believing silence was grace, that letting people underestimate me was easier than proving them wrong. But as their laughter echoed, I realized grace had turned into surrender. I set my glass down, and for the first time in years, I looked each of them in the eye. They didn't know it yet, but this was the last night they'd ever laugh at me. The lake had already frozen that November, its surface hard and silver under the early Wisconsin cold. From the window of my car, the lights from my sister's house shimmered against the dark water like something untouchable. I sat for a moment before stepping out, bracing myself for the kind of warmth that burns instead of comforts. Inside, the house smelled like cinnamon and expensive candles. Marjorie's laughter filled every corner, bright, performative, echoing off the glass walls. Around the table, my family leaned in toward her, drawn to her confidence like moths to light. I took my seat at the far end, smiled when they glanced my way, and kept my hands folded in my lap. The dinner began with stories about promotions, business trips, a Florida yacht, and the new contract her husband's company was about to land with the Defense Department. My parents nodded proudly. My sister's voice, smooth and steady, carried across the table as if she were performing for an audience that already adored her. Then someone asked about me. Before I could open my mouth, Marjorie tilted her head and said it, softly, almost kindly, as if she were protecting me from embarrassment. "She's just a clerk. Keeps papers somewhere downtown." Laughter followed, quick and polite, the kind people use to smooth over cruelty. I kept my smile, even as my knuckles turned white around the stem of my glass. At the end of the table, a man's voice cut through the noise. "Whitaker, have we met before?" It was Mr. Dean, her husband's superior. His eyes lingered on me longer than they should have. I met his gaze, steady, unflinching. "Possibly," I said, "a long time ago." The room went still, for a breath. The world narrowed to the space between us. Then Marjorie laughed too loudly, and the conversation stumbled forward again. I set my glass down and listened to the chatter dissolve into background noise. Inside my mind, something old and buried began to stir. Sand, wind, static on a radio, a voice calling through the dust. Echo 6. "Do you copy?" 15 years of silence cracked open in a single heartbeat. The next morning broke pale and thin, the kind of winter light that never truly warms a room. My coffee sat cold beside the old military radio on the table, its metal casing scratched and dusted with age. I turned the dial out of habit, expecting only static, but through the hiss came a faint, rhythmic tone. Echo 6, transmission clear. The sound froze me mid-breath. It had been years since I'd heard that call sign, but it carried the same weight as a heartbeat. Echo 6, the name I had answered to in another life, under desert skies that smelled of jet fuel and sand. I'd served in tactical communications, stationed at Al Udeid Air Base in Iraq. My job was to keep voices alive through chaos, routing signals, decoding coordinates, keeping hope from dying out over static. One night in 2005, a convoy went dark under ambush, 12 soldiers trapped, communications shredded by interference, for 17 hours. I sat in a metal trailer, headset glued to my ears, refusing to give in to exhaustion. At dawn, a broken voice came through. Convoy secured. All alive. The commander was Colonel Dean. 3 of my own didn't survive the blast that ended that mission. Afterward, people called me a hero, but I could never wear that word without hearing their names. I asked to be reassigned, anywhere quiet. The Air Force granted me Falcon Comms, a classified communications program buried under bureaucracy. On record, I became an administrative clerk. In truth, I carried a clearance high enough to access what most people didn't know existed. That title suited me. It kept questions away. That evening, when I logged into my secure inbox, a new email waited. Project Falcon Comms. Final clearance required. Authorized A. Whitaker. I scrolled through the documents until a familiar name stopped me cold. Bell Strategic Systems, my sister's company. I leaned back, staring out the window as snow drifted down like ash. Half of me wanted to close the laptop and walk away. The other half, the one that had once lived by discipline and code, knew fate rarely left things unfinished. Attached to the message was a file labeled Preliminary Data Transfer. I opened it. Strings of encrypted text filled the screen, black lines scrolling across white. Then I saw it. F-245, a code from my old operation, classified, buried, never meant to exist outside a secured military server. Someone had copied it, someone with access they should never have had. The radio beside me crackled again, a low whisper of static, as if the past itself was breathing through the room. I watched the snow gather on the sill and whispered to the hum in the air. Let's see who's flying blind this time. 3 days later, the office greeted me with silence and the soft hum of fluorescent lights. The nameplate on my desk still read Administrative Clerk, a harmless lie that let me disappear in plain sight. I liked it that way. The young analyst from the next cubicle stopped by with a steaming cup. Morning, Ms. Whitaker. You're always first in. Old habits die hard, I said, taking the coffee and watching him leave, unaware he'd just handed caffeine to the woman who held the power to end half the contracts in the building. I opened the Falcon Comms folder again. The breach in the Bell strategic file wasn't a mistake. The metadata showed the encryption had been lifted directly from an internal government system. Someone had gone fishing where only the military swam. On my notepad, I wrote one word: violation. That night, the quiet in my kitchen pressed close. I scrolled through my phone, searching for distraction, until I saw Marjorie's face glowing on the screen. She stood beside her husband, dressed for a gala in Chicago, the caption beneath their photo glowing with pride. Proud moment. Big contract ahead. Behind them, the Bell strategic logo gleamed under stage lights, and next to them, Mr. Dean. His expression was polite, practiced, but I recognized the same cautious intelligence I'd seen across the dinner table. If Dean was her husband's superior, the contract she bragged about was the one sitting on my desk, waiting for my approval. The irony almost made me laugh. All those years of silence, all those nights pretending to be ordinary, and now, fate was handing me the file that could decide my sister's future. I set the phone down, letting the darkness settle around me. The radio on the counter glowed faintly, its dial turned toward nothing. Falcon Comms, I murmured. The words a blend of memory and warning. Let's see who's really listening now. I hadn't wanted to attend that second dinner. My mother called earlier, her tone fragile, pleading with me not to hold grudges. Marjorie only wants to make peace, she said, but peace wasn't what drew me there. I needed to see how far my sister would go in a game she didn't know I was playing, too. The restaurant in downtown Chicago gleamed under crystal lights, the kind of place that smelled like money and effort. A hostess led me through a corridor of laughter and perfume until I saw Marjorie waving, her red dress catching the light like a flare. She looked powerful, adored, perfectly at ease. Agnes, you made it, she said brightly, her tone sugar over glass. I sat, smiled, and let the performance begin. The table buzzed with talk of contracts, travel, and recognition. Marjorie spoke like she was giving a press conference. Her company, Bell Strategic Systems, was this close to signing something major with the Department of Defense. I kept my expression neutral. Someone asked about me, and before I could answer, Marjorie laughed. She's harmless, she said, probably stamps forms for a living. The laughter that followed was quiet, polite, and cutting. I kept my hands steady on the tablecloth. I do handle forms, I said, classified ones sometimes. Dean's eyes lifted. He didn't laugh. As the dinner went on, I listened. The way Marjorie spoke about Falcon comms told me more than she intended. Details no civilian should know. Technical terms woven into small talk. She wasn't just careless. She was standing on stolen ground. When the evening wound down, Dean leaned toward me, his voice low. Ms. Whitaker, we have an appointment next Monday, don't we? Yes, sir. I'll see you there. Marjorie smirked. Don't tell me you two work together. Not quite. But our paths cross sometimes. Her laugh wavered when Dean set his glass down. Later, as I stepped outside into the cold, my phone buzzed. Unauthorized entry detected in Secure File F245. User ID, M. Bell. The city lights blurred in the snow. I exhaled slowly, the breath sharp against the night. The pieces were moving. Monday came gray and windless. The Defense Department's Chicago office felt heavier than usual. Glass, steel, and authority wrapped in silence. I passed through security checkpoints with the same badge that kept me invisible for years. Defense Communications Advisor, Clearance Level 7. Inside the conference room, Marjorie froze when she saw me. Agnes? What are you doing here? Official duty, I said. Dean rose. Gentlemen, this is Ms. Whitaker, also known as Echo 6. She'll be conducting the final clearance for Falcon comms. Silence. Her glass slipped, shattering across the table. I opened the folder. Before we proceed, I said, there's a security anomaly in your submission. Section 4B. I turned the screen toward them. This encryption string, F245, belongs to a classified radio code used during tactical operations. 2005, Al Udeid Air Base. Dean's voice broke the quiet. That's the same code that saved my convoy, Marjorie whispered. That's impossible. We only used sample data. Then explain how a private contractor accessed a code under Operation Falcon, I said calmly. The room held its breath. Falcon comms wasn't named after a bird. I added, it was named after a fallen pilot. Dean straightened. Meeting adjourned. The project is now under review. When the room emptied, he lingered in the doorway. We always wondered what happened to Echo 6. Now you know, I said. And now you know who your contractors really are. The door closed behind him. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was victory without celebration. Snow fell thick across Chicago as I left the Falcon comms building, the streets blurred by white and silence. In my car, the radio whispered, Defense contract suspended pending security review. It didn't take long for the world to know. My phone rang again and again. On the third call, I answered. Agnes, please, you can fix this. It's just a misunderstanding. I pulled to the curb, staring through the windshield. A misunderstanding involving classified codes? You used Falcon encryption in your proposal. I didn't know. The tech team. Your name is on it. The line went quiet except for her uneven breathing. Then she broke. Between sobs. Marjorie confessed. One of her husband's engineers had borrowed data from someone inside the department. She'd stayed silent because that favor could save her company. Agnes, don't report it. I'm begging you. You already reported yourself, I said, and hung up. The stillness after felt heavier than anger. My hands didn't shake, but my heart did. That night, I sat at my desk, staring at the open file. Her name, his signature, every trace of deception bound in neat order. An email blinked on my screen. Clearance Board requests your final recommendation by 0800. Dean's note followed at the end of the document. Advisor's discretion permitted. Case may remain confidential. He was giving me the choice. Justice or mercy. Outside. Snow covered everything in white silence. In my mind, a voice from another life whispered through static. Echo 6, you hold the line. And for the first time, I knew holding it didn't mean staying quiet. It meant standing where truth still had weight. Morning came gray and cold. Inside the department building, the air felt electric. Dean waited in the corridor. You don't have to do this, he said, I do. Some truths need to be said out loud. The conference room was packed. Officials, auditors, my sister and her husband at one end, and, unexpectedly, my parents near Dean. The board wanted transparency. He explained. I began calmly. Bell Strategic Systems violated Section 8 of federal security law. But given the circumstances, I recommend internal sanctions, not public prosecution. Relief crossed Marjorie's face, tears forming. But I added quietly, integrity doesn't survive behind closed doors. It needs light. I placed the folder on the table and turned to Dean. Your decision, sir. He nodded. Recommendation accepted. Project terminated. Case sealed. The silence afterward felt sacred. Marjorie whispered. You saved me? No, I said. I saved what's left of our name. Dean stepped forward and handed me a thin envelope. From the Pentagon, he said. Recognition for past service. The Falcon Medal. Inside, a single line. Echo 6. For carrying silence as your shield. Marjorie looked at me, her voice barely a breath. All these years, we never knew. You didn't have to, I said. That's what made it easier. At the door, my father spoke softly behind me. I didn't raise you to fight wars alone. I smiled faintly. You did, Dad. You just never realized it. The wind cut sharp against the steps of the defense building as I left, snow swirling in small, frantic spirals. I saw her standing there, Marjorie, her red coat bright against the gray morning, her eyes swollen, her face pale with exhaustion. She ran toward me, breath hitching in the cold. You could have destroyed me. Why didn't you? I kept walking, but she stepped in front of me, her voice breaking. You think you're better than me, don't you? Because of your medals and your secrets? I stopped. The air between us stung like ice. No. Marjorie, I said softly. I just think I'm older than you, in pain. Her tears came fast now, unguarded. I wanted to be respected. She said, You were always the quiet one, the invisible one. But they listened to you. Even Dad did. Respect isn't a prize. I told her. It's a debt. You don't demand it. You earn it. Her shoulders trembled. When we were kids, she said, they always called you stable, dependable, the one who'd never cause trouble. I spent my whole life trying to outshine that. I envied your calm. Agnes. I thought silence meant weakness. Now I know it was strength. I placed a hand on her shoulder. We carried different battles, I said. Yours was loud. Mine just left echoes. Dean appeared at the doorway, a sealed envelope in hand. He handed it to her quietly. Confidential closure. Inside. She found the termination notice, but beneath it, a handwritten line from me. Integrity preserved. No public disclosure authorized. Marjorie broke down, clutching the paper like a lifeline. Go home, I said gently. You still have time to rebuild what really matters. A few weeks later, Christmas came early to Madison. The air smelled of pine and frost, the kind that carried memories instead of warmth. I was pouring coffee when a soft knock came from the porch. By the time I opened the door, no one was there, just a plain envelope tucked in the crack. No name, no return address. Inside was handwriting I knew too well. Agnes. I used to think being loud made me seen, but you proved that silence can echo longer than applause. I'm sorry for every dinner, every word, every look I gave you. Thank you for not ruining me when you had every right to. You were never just a clerk. You were the reason people like me get second chances. I don't expect forgiveness. I just hope one day you'll let me try to earn it. The ink had bled slightly, as if the letter had been written through tears. I placed it gently on the table beside my badge, marked Echo 6, and the silver medal Dean had given me. The late afternoon sun filtered through the window, turning the paper gold. Tucked inside the envelope was a small photograph, 2 girls sitting by Lakewood, her hand resting on my shoulder. On the back, in that same trembling handwriting, maybe we can start from here. I didn't write back. I simply folded the letter and placed it in the drawer where I kept things worth remembering, the ones that needed silence to survive. Lakewood was frozen solid, the surface smooth and pale beneath the winter sun. I sat by the window with a cup of coffee warming my hands, watching the stillness stretch across the ice. The light reflected off the frozen lake like a mirror, quiet and endless. On the table beside me lay Marjorie's letter, neatly folded, and my worn identification card marked Echo 6. The edges had faded from years of use, but the name still held. I turned on the old radio. A soft jazz melody by Chet Baker drifted through the room, slow and weightless. Outside, the sound of jet engines broke the silence, a training squadron cutting across the clear morning sky. I looked up, following their trails of white threading through the clouds. Still flying, Echo 6. I whispered. A small smile found its way to my lips. No anger, no bitterness, just the quiet peace that comes when you finally understand that honor isn't something granted. It's something guarded, often in silence. The phone rang, its sound gentle against the music. Dean's voice came through, steady as ever. Ma'am, we're dedicating a section of Falcon Comms to honor all silent officers. We'd like to name it Echo Wing. You don't need to, I said softly. We do, he replied, because silence deserves a place in history. I looked out at the lake, nodding to no one. Then make it quiet, I said. That's how we'd want it. The jets disappeared beyond the clouds. I rested my hand over the Echo 6 badge and smiled. One last, quiet smile.